Well, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. Well, welcome today. I hope you have, we plan an informative session today. Today we're going to share some of the experience from the state of Minnesota's MNLARS project in using DevOps and going through the CI and CD process to improve business operations. Today, we have Tom Schaefer, who's the Chief Operating Officer for MNIT Services. We have Paul Meekins, who's the Chief Business Technology Officer. I like saying that instead of CTO. For the Department of Public Safety, as well as the Department of Corrections. And we have Susan Rode, who is the Director of Applications Development for the MNLARS project.
We're good? All right. So, like Brian just said, I'm Tom Schaefer, I'm Assistant Commissioner and Chief Operating Officer for IT for the state of Minnesota. And I hope a lot of you got to the keynote today because I think some themes will resonate from what they were talking about to what we're going to talk about today, because it's really about the people. To get this transformation, you need technology. AWS is a great platform for that, but it's really about the people and about the transformation of how you do business and the operations. We're going to talk about that, talk about one of our case studies. Paul and Sue will talk more about that. I want to give you a little background though, and actually this is really about a story that I think all of us have in our background in what we do for public sector. The story's the same almost everywhere. Everybody I talk to a lot of different states about this. We all have aging infrastructure. Cal Poly had a picture of a data center. That's near and dear to my heart. I've got data centers like that too, right? They're falling apart. They're aging out. You've got to put big money into them. But not only the infrastructure for the server infrastructure, but also the application infrastructure that are aging out. I know Minnesota has many applications that are getting very old. And in the end, they are applications. We've got some that are almost 30 years old, running on mainframes, haven't been updated. Which gets us to another point, which is very hard to secure. Cybersecurity is the #1 priority for the state of Minnesota. It's probably many of your #1 priority as well. And it's important that we can solve these problems, because in the end, if we can't secure the data, for us, it's about securing the data for the citizens of the state of Minnesota. It's all about that for us, because in the end, I don't own any data from citizens, but I am the stewards of that data. So trying to secure it, I'm sure you have that problem as well in many of your states or your organizations. We also have a lack of budget problem. I used to work in the private sector. I had budget to do things like this. We don't have that kind of budget in state government. And a lot of that, it becomes an issue for us for fixing the problems. But in the end, we also have to have security, but disaster recovery. The ability to recover that data, ability to recover these systems. People rely on the systems for unemployment payment, for food stamps, for other things. And these are problems that everybody has. And I think we're going to talk about how AWS and changing the culture of an organization can solve some of these problems. So a little bit more about Minnesota. We're a cloud-first state. We've been in the cloud since 2010. It's a big thing for us. We've tried really hard to move things to the cloud. We were one of the first states to move into the cloud for email. But really, in those first few years, it was really about platform as a service and software as a service. I would say in the last 2 years, we're looking more at how do we use the infrastructure of an AWS or another cloud provider? How do we use more what I call the true cloud, the automation, the things like that? We'll get into that a little bit more. Paul will talk about the case study. Modernizing those systems. We had a 30-year-old system running on a mainframe. How do we modernize a system like that without putting tons of money into it to get it there? Agility. So our business partners, our agencies in the state of Minnesota who deliver those services to the citizens, they want us to be agile. They want us to make sure that we can deliver new solutions to them quickly. And they want us to be innovative. And we want to be innovative for them, because in the end, we're trying to give them solutions that will get them to deliver the services that they're trying to deliver for their mission. So we say in Minnesota that our mission is actually to deliver on all the missions for the people that live in the state of Minnesota. So that's delivering on the missions for all the 70 agencies, boards, and commissions that we have. So our values, we partner. Partner is it's a generic word, but it means a lot to us, because you might have seen the title of the presentation. We have a tagline, it's called Partners in Performance. And what that means for us in Minnesota is that we partner both operations partners with app dev in a DevOps model, which you'll hear more about in a little bit. But we also partner with our business agency partners who deliver to the citizens of the state of Minnesota. And ultimately, we need to partner with the citizens to make sure that we're delivering to what they need from their taxpayer dollars. But again, we can talk about partnering all day long. If we're not delivering the solutions, it doesn't matter how much we partner with them. It's all about delivery. Transforming, again, back to the Cal Poly picture that he had in the keynote, we can't keep living in data center chaos, where we've got old data centers, multiple data centers, we can't secure them. So I think you'll hear in the case study, transformation, moving to the cloud, gives us a lot of ability to solve some of these problems. And finally, it's about connecting people together. Connecting app dev with operations, connecting citizens with the services they need, and doing more things in mobile. So those are a lot of our values. So in Minnesota, we have a saying that says, people support things that they help create. Let me say that again, because it's super important to our message today. People support things they help to create. In the end, what we did in Minnesota, and what I'd recommend for all of you that are on this journey to the cloud, you have to get the people involved with how you're going to build it out. One thing I didn't tell you in the beginning, but I left state government for a couple years and worked for a small cloud endpoint backup solution out of Minnesota, and learned a lot about how the cloud works from a back end of the cloud. We had a purpose-built cloud for backing up endpoints. So they had a huge development shop, but that purpose-built cloud wasn't for application development, it was for backing up. So we used AWS to do our app dev work. So when I was there, we started out by just giving developers opportunities to use AWS, and what I call cloud chaos ensued. They all had different instances, they all had different images, they all had different environments that they were using. They were running all day, all night, they didn't turn them off, and we had a lot of problems. So what I learned from that experience was we needed to have an organization that actually was ready for the cloud. So when I was there about 2 years, we retracted from cloud chaos, put some governance and some process in place, and actually got to a place where we could deliver real-time development environments where they could do their work. And that's what I brought back to the state of Minnesota, and you'll hear more about today. So finally, how do you get an enterprise capacity in the cloud? Back to what I was saying about cloud chaos, you can't just let it happen naturally. It doesn't work that way. You'll get people doing all kinds of different things. There'll be a lot of people doing things in different ways. And you'll have the problem that I know I have. I was having this discussion last night. In the on-prem environment, you'd have an environment for a test QA, a development environment, and a production environment, and none of them were in sync. So you go into a QA environment, you do all your testing on your new application, and you put it in production, it doesn't work for some reason. It's because the environments don't look the same. They don't work the same. So what we did is we brought everybody together, and if you want to have a really fun week, and Brian can back me up on this because he lived through it, bring in all of your QA, PMs, BAs, all of your development staff, not all, but a subset of development staff, and your operational staff into a room, and security, and have them talk about how you're going to build out an organization to run a cloud. Everybody talked over each other for about 2 days, talked about how it won't work. They talked about all the different problems why this will not work. And after everybody kind of stopped yelling at each other and started listening to each other, we started making progress. Put together roles and responsibilities, put together a lot of the things that you need in place to be able to actually build the cloud and still have the agility and the ability that the cloud gives you. That was the other thing that's a big issue that you're going to face, and we face it, and we still face it today. People that like doing things the old-fashioned way, trying to build the cloud like a data center that's just an additional data center. Getting past some of those issues, but what you really need to do is change the culture. You need to get the people together and have them work together. And what you'll hear about in the case study that Paul's going to talk about in just a second is, so I took the IT groups together, and we got a good step on that one. But really, it takes more than that. It takes the business involved in it too. And the case study we're going to talk about right now is actually about the Minnesota Driver Vehicle Records Service. And it's a case study that I'll let Paul take over.
Thanks, Tom. Could someone start the clock? That would perhaps be helpful, so I'll go over otherwise for sure. So thank you. So good morning. It's nice to see you all. Just a little bit of background on how we're organized here. We're all a part of MNIT, which is a Minnesota IT organization. And Tom's the assistant commissioner, COO. He's at the enterprise level. I'm head of IT for the agency. Here we're talking about public safety. Sue is the director of application development. And I bring that up because I'm sure that many of you are from complex IT organizations like this that support complex businesses. And what we really did here, and it's everything that Tom talked about, is to not have the cloud chaos. We had to start at the top level, bring it together so we could support this thing. And so we're just going to now, with this case study, start peeling it back. Okay? So we started at that higher level where Tom was at the enterprise level. Now we're down into an agency. Now I'm down into a division or a business unit, which is DMV. In most states, DMV is its own administration or its own agency. Let's get into that. And then we're just going to kind of peel that back more and get down to the ground level where we're really going to see some of the capabilities that we're using in AWS Cloud that enables what we have going on. So, okay. This is brutal. And I was watching this movie with my kids, and I will say I started to laugh. And then I felt really icky. And I'm like, oh, no disrespect to I can't even have it up there that long. No disrespect to the business unit that I support. But let's face it, in government, this is often the impression for decades that we have. And so after I got done feeling icky, I said to myself, all right, Paul, what is IT's responsibility and what is our ability to shatter this image, right? That's tough. But where we are now, with the technologies that are out there now, we have that ability to get rid of this sloth-like interaction for DMV. I firmly believe that, and we're going to talk about that here today. So I want to give you a little context on DMV. I would say in conversations I have with friends and family that most people are like, oh, DMV, it's not, whatever. It's big, but it's not that complicated. Well, we know driver's license. Most people get their Class D. Most people title and reg their passenger vehicle. That's not a big deal. We do a lot of those transactions. But then it starts to get a little more complicated. We have tons of special plates. Every year the legislature issues more special plates. When it starts, so we have the scale. We do a lot of transactions. As you can see here, we take a lot of phone calls. But when you get down into the behind the other business processes that not everyone sees, like compliance, right? Now, so I'm told that 1 in 7 people in the state of Minnesota get a DWI. So maybe more people than I think are going through our compliance business process. That's not really a good thing. But there are people that see that side of it. But that gets very, very complicated. And then a couple other things. We have over 100 interfaces to systems, other agencies, state agencies, federal government, tow truck operators, banks, I mean, you name it. And they're all looking for that data to be correct, consistent, and timely. I want to talk about one other thing as far as complexity for Minnesota. We're a little bit unique from other states, and that is that we have driver's license agents and deputy registrars. So when most people in most states go to do their DMV work, right, they're going to a state-operated outlet. In Minnesota, that is not the case. They are franchised. They are not state employees. And I want to bring that up because the complexity of determining your business processes with a whole organization, and they are organized, that does the face-to-face work for the DMV makes it very complicated. We often think of the DMV as the face of government. That's not entirely fair to all the other great government systems, but for us, it helps keep us focused on the people of Minnesota. So a brief project history, because what I want to talk about here is the fact that MNLARS has been around for a long time. This project, too long in many views, but we have gone through two iterations. I want to give a little bit of the context of the first iteration because it then highlights and contrasts how terrific and wonderful things are in this current iteration that we have with our more current processes and the technologies in AWS Cloud that we're using to enable that. So in May of 12, we kicked off the project. We went through a long and arduous RFP process and a contracting process. We came out of that with a contract that we were excited about, and at the time, back in 12, using a waterfall approach was pretty standard. It was acceptable. We've tried to put a lot of iterative language in there, but we still ended up with like mini waterfall on that. And the goal was that in October, it's supposed to be 2013, my apologies, we would have our first release. So in August of 12, we began a requirements definition, took us a little while to get formed up, and we were psyched. All systems were go. And then this happened. And it was quite a crazy train, right? And so we waited and waited and waited to announce that we weren't going to make that October date. Finally, at the last minute, we announced it. Then come March, we start to roll it out. oops, not good enough, we pull it back. We start patching. In May, we patch it, and we continue the rollout. But now every 3 to 4 months, we're patching. And we're going right over that waterfall. And I don't really need, I mean, if I look around this room, I'm sure many of you have experienced it before, and I'm sure many of you have ended up here. So a show of hands on how many people ended up in the Valley of Despair, right? Some people, if you've done it multiple times, Valley of Despair, awful. Let's just say that winter wasn't my season that year. And so it's like, well, how do we get out of here? What are we going to do about this? So in the spring of 15, we rebooted. And we come back and we say, well, let's partner with the business more deeply. And I know that many of you are furiously writing that down. That's a great platitude, Paul. You know, great statement of goodness. But what's it mean? Well, we're going to peel it back because, you know, this has meaning to us. Like Tom said, this actually has meaning to us. And when we put the strategies in place to partner with the business, it is meaningful and it's day-to-day and it's real. And we engage them deeply in the process. Whereas before, with the waterfall, right, get the requirements, build the code, ship it, oh, it's bad, it's not going to do it. Now we're talking about going in deep, working with them every day on a cadence, and having well-defined roles between the two, right? Well, what does that sound like? Okay, Agile. So everyone write that down, right? Okay, great conference, Paul. Now we got partner with the business, and we got Agile. But it's how you do it, right? And so when you look at those principles of Agile, and you drill down into them, and what that means for partnering with the business, there, as many of you probably have experienced, there's a lot there. That transparency, that sustainability, you know, that's a big part of it. It's a very large, complex system, and we have a cadence which allows us to move through on this and not get burned out. And that day-to-day engagement with the business and the stakeholders on that. And so that's cool, and the promise of Agile is really cool. And when you think of Agile being successful, a lot of times you think of one group, you know, the two pizza thing in the corner, maybe engage with a line of business. But then you get to a DMV, right? And it's that 500 employees. They haven't done a major system in 35 years. They're very intransigent. They're maybe a little bit bureaucratic. They're very command and control. How do we do this? Well, we have to scale it up, right? I think I went too far there. There we go. So we have to scale this thing up. So now you're talking about a development team of about 100 people. And the communications, you can see that communication diagram and how intricate and complicated that is. Well, that is only possible to run a scaled Agile effort if you have the technologies to support it. And so we're going to start peeling this back now. And in a second here, Sue's going to come up and talk about some of the specific things and strategies we're doing around that. You have to do scaled. We picked SAFE, which is Scaled Agile Framework. We pretty much, instead of inventing something new, pretty much have engaged in that and followed it to the letter because it gives us a real good roadmap to work on it. And you need this technology and these tools to enable that process, to turbocharge that process so that you can go scale, right? Sue's going to talk about 3 different patterns here, 3 different things we're working on as far as partnering and using the technologies and these Agile and SAFE methodologies to really raise us up to a point where, and I will say this, when we were in that Valley of Despair, we couldn't hardly sit at the table with the business. And now, when we're at the table with the business, people who come, auditors, other people, they're like, we can't believe how well you guys get along and how well you communicate. And that's all a part of this. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sue.
Thank you, Paul. And I'm really, really jealous that you took the good graphic. You know, it was such a wonderful graphic. But thank you for inviting us to share our experiences. I'm excited to talk about the stuff that we've got going in MNLARS. Just so people know, because it's been used a couple times, it's the Minnesota License and Vehicle Registration System is what it stands for. So I'm going to start by talking about Agile, and more specifically about scaled Agile. Then I'll go into the 3 examples. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about culture. Okay, so scaled Agile framework. Lots of people have heard about the scaled Agile framework. I joined MNLARS in 2015. The decision had been made to go to Agile. At that time, there were 3 developers in a corner, and we had a mandate and money, and we needed to scale quickly. And so what we did is we selected the Scaled Agile framework, and we did it for 4 reasons. First of all, it could scale to multiple development teams, which was kind of our problem, right? I mean, we're not going to build a massive system with 3 developers in the corner. The documentation was publicly available, it was well documented, because one of the things with Agile is you're constantly bringing people on board. You get new customers, you get new developers, QA shows up, the auditors show up. You've got to have somewhere to have them look to say, okay, this is what we're doing. And as Paul said, we took it pretty much whole cloth, so we could just point them to the Scaled Agile website, which is pretty impressive, and they could figure out what we were doing. Another reason we did this is because you can get certified and you can hire people who are certified. And so, you know, sometimes with Agile, it's a little hard to tell what people know when they walk in the door. And being able to say that someone is SAFe certified at a certain level is very helpful when you're hiring people. It's also really helpful when you want to get trained yourself. So we found, and we've done both. We've hired certified people and we have gotten ourselves trained. The next reason we did this is because of the tooling. There is some really excellent tooling out there, and in our case, we went with Rally. There are, as Paul mentioned, about 100 people working on this process, building this application, and every day, including today, I logged into Rally to see where we were at. I know exactly where we're at from a delivery standpoint, where our quality is at, where our next release is at, and the tooling is really, I just can't say enough about how important that is. And Paul looks at the tooling as well, and he gets the same information I get, as does everybody else. So that's pretty important. I want to talk a little bit about one of the real strengths of Scaled Agile, and that's how they plan. So you plan your work in 10-week, what are called program increments. And everybody gets together for 2 days, and I mean everybody. And here's where I'm going to start to layer in a little bit of the DevOps stuff. Because one of the things that we did is, in addition to our application people, we brought in our operations people and our DevOps teams. So we were all in the same cadence, we were all speaking the same language, we knew how to put work on each other's plates so we didn't surprise each other. That was really important. And it was a benefit that I'm not sure we expected to get. The last thing I want to talk a little bit about on Scaled Agile is metrics. And we are a really metrics-driven organization. As I said, we put it all in Rally. We know exactly what we can deliver in 2 weeks or in 10 weeks. And this is a virtuous cycle with our business partners, right? Because then they plan the work, they prioritize the work. That's pretty clear. But to know you're going to get the work is really more unusual. And to every 2 weeks to go in and see that the work is getting done is important. Okay, so I am now going to talk about our 3 Agile projects. So there's a lot of goodness in Scaled Agile, but it leads you to automation, and it, I think, really is going to lead you to a cloud vendor, AWS in our case. So the first project that we took on was moving, well, we had 2 problems. Let me start by talking about the problems we had. So our first problem was that our application build took 55 minutes, which is just not acceptable in Agile. I mean, the idea is that every time you check in, you rebuild the app, you know if you've screwed it up. And that's not going to happen if it takes you almost an hour to do the build. So what we wound up doing is moving our build into the cloud and running it on a really large server, and it takes us 5 minutes. 55 minutes to 5 minutes. That is amazing. And from my perspective, it's just like I got a free developer delivered to me. Because they can't do anything, right? They're really pretty much hamstrung while that build's going on. The second problem that we had is environments. So you all know there's testing environments, there's development environments, every dev has their own environment. And I had 150 servers dedicated to this. We have 14 environments. We were just at the point where we were about to triple that. I don't want to do that. This project isn't going to go on forever. And so What we really wanted was to spin those environments up, use them, and then drop them back down. So it was a natural for the cloud. And so we are actually in the process of migrating all the environments into the cloud, and we're a good way towards getting that done. And we expect that to really drop our costs. We also expect it to really increase our productivity. Okay. Disaster recovery. I think this is some real low-hanging fruit. For us to go into production, we absolutely had to have a disaster recovery solution like everybody else. You know, you've got a lot of servers sitting there. They need to be patched. They need to be managed. You know, they're all kind of humming there, waiting for the disaster that hopefully never comes. But you have to have them, and it's expensive. So what we've done is we've stood up what's called a pilot light implementation in AWS. We have a very small footprint. You know, we keep the data up to date, we keep the application up to date, and so in our case, let's say the disaster does come, who knows, tornado, something. I'm sure we're not vulnerable to a single tornado, but we get tornadoes. So we'll just, the generic disaster comes, and all we have to do is just swing the traffic around, and this really very small footprint then just very eloquently scales, and you know, we take a several minute outage, which in our case we could actually absorb, and we save an enormous amount of money. Hopefully the disaster never comes. Okay, now the last thing. I'll try to emote how excited I am about this last thing. So we have an ancient image management application. It has 13 terabytes of data. It takes 10 servers to run. All of those servers are needing to be replaced, are well past, you know, when they should have been replaced. So we looked at this as an opportunity to do a cloud-first application architecture. And we have it designed. It is going to be a serverless application. It will use 4 Lambda services. We expect it to be a very simple, straightforward application to maintain, can scale to whatever it needs to scale. Inherently will get all the goodness that's baked into the AWS services, and it will be cheaper and faster. So let me close with this quote. Culture eats strategy for breakfast every morning. This is a Peter Drucker quote, and it's one of my favorites. I try to keep this top of mind when I am engaged in activities that change, that require people to change. And Agile and DevOps both require people to change a great deal. I think one of the reasons we've been as successful as we have been and been able to move at the speed we have on MNLARS is that we just took culture on from the beginning. And how we took it on is we just started talking about it. I'll say that again, we just started talking about it. And so we would go to our customers and say, you know, we really need to think about how we, address our culture. You know, it's too hierarchical. It is too siloed. It is this and that. And we started that conversation. I started that conversation with my peer in ops. And as a result, I think we've been able to bring that whole organization along very well and really run into minimal resistance. People talk about culture change all the time. I want to talk about 3 elements, though, because I think sometimes, getting from 10,000 feet to something actionable is harder. So in our case, we focused on moving from a hero culture, to a team culture. And, the hero culture where people come, they work night and day, they work all weekend, and they save the project, and they save the day, and everything is good because, Jill did this, right? And we wanted to move that to a team culture where we focus on the team, we reward the team, we focus on predictable delivery, all the goodness that you get out of team. Commitments come from teams. So that's sort of one big cultural shift. That's going to be harder to make than you think. That's pretty embedded in cultures from the top of the house, downstream. The second shift that we made is from planning everything up front, kind of the big A architecture, to plan just what you need. And that's just, that just makes sense from an Agile perspective. But again, it's a big transition for people. Auditors find this hard to believe. How is this not all planned out to the nth degree? Architects find that hard to believe. I mean, there's a lot of people that find that very unnerving. And I think for DevOps, the final shift is really going from kind of siloed organizations to collaboration. And I think that, again, that's got to be something that's demonstrated at the top of the house every day, all day. So that when somebody comes to me and they say, gee, the ops team is doing something that I think is not right, I don't just agree with them. I pivot and I say, well, let's collaborate. Let's go talk to the ops side of the house. What are they trying to do, and vice versa. So as a result, I think we have moved the needle quite a bit. We still have a ways to go, but we've made good progress. So that's kind of the points I wanted to cover. Let me turn it back to Tom, and you can wrap it up.
Take a minute to thank Paul and Sue. I mean, when we started this effort to go to the cloud, as Paul talked about with the project having its waterfall, I love that picture, and the DMV, picture that everybody's got in their mind, you think about that, and this is one of those things that people can kind of get their mind around, right? Everybody's got a driver's license, everybody's got license plates, they've had to go through that process. I mean, Pixar makes fun of it, right? So everybody knows it. And this was an example of something where we could actually change how this business works using a culture shift, honestly, but technology involved with it. But it wasn't the only change that we made as part of this. As part of, I talked about our original effort of changing, getting ops and app dev together and doing all that work. We actually did a number of different pilots. And I want to bring this up because I think that there's a couple of things that if you haven't started making this transformation, there's low-hanging fruit out there that are a great place to start these things. Simple migrations. I mean, you hear about it, just lift and shift. Take something out of your data center, move it into the cloud. But use the methodology we're talking about with getting the people together when you do it. Don't just let somebody go and take an image of a VM and move it into the cloud. Otherwise, you're going to get that cloud chaos I was talking about in the beginning. Disaster recovery, I think that was a great example of one of the things we've done with it. I know a lot of other applications in the state of Minnesota that have never had disaster recovery. It's actually very simple to do, simple with air quotes, to do by using cloud services for it. It's something we definitely should be looking at as low-hanging fruit. Geospatial, a lot of opportunity for geospatial in the cloud. It's a lot of data, which makes it useful for moving to the cloud, but it's also something that you need a lot of connections to, so it's a great opportunity. So these are all things that we did. Test dev environments, DevOps, as Sue talked about. It's a great opportunity. Back to when I was in the private sector, that's what we used it for. And like Sue mentioned, we would spin up environments, we would run test scripts against new deployments. It would pull the data back for whether it passed, failed, and why it did. And that was about less than an hour from time of start the build, deploy, test, and bring it back. And you're talking about dollars worth of usage. Instead of having data centers full of servers for dev environments, all the environments were the same. Your results were consistent because you knew your environments were the same. And it really is a great opportunity to change some of that culture of how we do deployments and how we do automation. And the Agile framework that we talked about here is definitely something that can be empowered by the disruptive technology of cloud. So we are a hybrid. We have on-prem data centers still, and I think we will for another 3 to 5 years. But we are actively working on figuring out how we can get most of our infrastructure into the cloud. One thing that I said was an aha moment for me in this whole process was, and probably all of you have had this experience. You've had a business partner come to you and say, oh, the cloud isn't secure. I can't go to the cloud because of security issues. The aha moment for me was, I actually can get better security in some areas than I can on my data center. Because I have, long story short, I used to have 49 data centers. I now have about 23 data centers, and quickly moving or closing them. But to secure 23 data centers with all the tooling that I need is nearly impossible. And it's cost prohibitive, you can't do it. So what we've done by moving to Amazon and cloud services, we put the security on it from the get-go. with all the logging, all the monitoring, all the things that we needed to do, and the checking, ongoing checking of security, that I just couldn't have implemented in the number of data centers I have. And by doing this, we're actually going to be more secure. Another example would be encryption. That would be cost prohibitive to do in my data center that I get by default. So enterprise capacity, I've talked about this a lot, so I won't dwell on it, but it's important that we're doing things at scale for the enterprise, but it's really about the people. You get all the tooling, you get all of the ability by going with cloud services, but it's about the people, bringing them together and getting them together, and having a cloud-first mentality, thinking about how you can use it. But that using cloud is a culture shift for people. I know from my staff from operations, they're very used to hugging servers, and they don't like that they can't hug servers anymore, so it's a big shift for us. So putting it all together, I think hopefully we've demonstrated that, with operations, which is my part of the world, Paul and Sue's on the app dev side, and then to partner with the business has really made a big shift for Minnesota. I guess if I can emphasize any point on that, it is that we all have to work together to get it done. It can't be just operations pushing it down app dev throat. App dev can't push operations into it either, and there's always that useful tension there. But it's got to be a collaboration, and then finally, it's got to be about what the business needs and how they need to deliver the services to the citizens of the state of Minnesota. So I guess if I can leave you with one final thing, while we're here at the AWS conference, it's not really about the technology. It's about the people who have to deliver it, and it's about delivering to your ultimate customer, whoever that is, for us, the citizens of the state of Minnesota. So making sure that they have the services they need at the time they need them, and when they want them and how they want to get to them, and getting to a place where they can actually use those services. So the technology enables it, but it's about the people in the end. So I thank you, and I don't know if this clock is right. I think we only have a couple minutes left, but we might have time for a question or two.
Well done. I just want to And I just wanted to say that I'm the practice manager for ProServe state and local government. I get to work with state governments across the country, and everyone is facing these issues. And I just want to commend my team. Has had the pleasure of working with Tom's team for the past year, and they actually make it all seem simple, but they are actually a trailblazer. They're writing the script on, I would call, enterprise cloud done right. We look at, and Tom emphasized that, but it's not only platform security and operations, which we go deep on, all the way down to run books and procedures, but it's also people. It's roles and responsibilities. It's organization. It's training and development. It's business. It's what does the business model look like? How do these IT projects align with the business strategy? I think that the MNLARS project is a great example of that. And one of the things that Tom wants to do, obviously, is to have some successes out front. MNLARS is a great success that probably will certainly generate a lot of followers with other state agencies. And then there's governance and, you know, decision rights, who's responsible for what. We've had a lot of fun with racy diagrams. And so I just want to commend Tom and Paul and Susan on a job well done. I know there are many other people involved, and I just want to commend them on a job well done. With that, I'll let you ask questions. Any questions?
What feedback have you gotten from citizens? What types of feedback have you gotten from citizens who have taken advantage of your IT services?
So I'll speak about MNLARS specifically here, which actually is, we are going live next month with our first major release using these technologies and these processes on that. And so, I mean, I guess stay tuned a little bit on that. We're very excited about it because we do have feedback because we've been in about a 12-week, what we call adoption period, which is sort of parallel production. And we've had terrific
response back on that. But we'll flip the big switch towards the end of July.
All right, that one's mine. It's a great question. Procurement is, well, it's going to be the death of me. But in the end, procurement in state government, and I don't know if you're with the state, but has been one of the biggest problems. So I mentioned that we started using cloud services back in 2010. So we've been fighting this battle with our Department of Administration, who's ultimately our procurement vehicle for the state. I will tell you that over the last, last 2 years for sure, but for the last 5 years, we've been arguing that is cloud commodity or is it, all the arguments, I see you nodding, you get what I'm saying there. We've actually finally gotten to a point where they're starting to understand it's like a utility. And you can't get to a point of understanding what your power bill is going to be every month for my data center because we use more power some months than other months, and you have to have just an encumbrance for that. So I think we've finally gotten our Department of Administration there, but it was a lot of conversations. So for us, we use national contracts using NASPO, Value Point, those type of things to get there. And it was really just partnering, we use that word a lot, partnering with that agency, which is our Department of Administration who does the contracts for us, and making sure they understand that it's not like buying a server. And I didn't mention it in this presentation. We have a cost one later that I'll probably bring it up, but it's also changing from a capital model to an operational model. And I will tell you from talking to CFOs for all the agencies that we partner with, they love this model because they don't like getting surprised by a multi-million-dollar ask. So that has helped me working with our Department of Administration to understand that because of that shift and having my partners also coming with me to the table to talk about that has helped our procurement vehicle understand that not only IT wants it, but also the agencies want it. So unfortunately, it's not the flip the switch kind of a scenario. It is actually a process. But in the end, the value of it for citizens, for taxpayers, is that we can spread our cost curve out and have a consistent model. Even though I said you can never predict what your cost is, it's not going to be these $2, $3, $5 million spikes. Again, Cal Poly talked about it would cost them, I think, $10 million to replace his data center or remodel his data center. We just can't sustain that type of a hit. And I know a lot of the budgets out there for you guys, we can't go to our legislature and ask for $10 million one time for stuff. They laugh us. Well, after they beat us up for a while, then they laugh at us, right? So that's the kind of things that we have to do. Does that answer your question? Okay. Sure.
So I really liked your kind of checkerboard of metrics about key transactions. After implementing this project, are you further enough along to see
Your metrics.
change in those metrics? That's the first question.
Hello? Yeah, one of the things that we get, and I'm sure you've seen it in some of the other sessions, is our metrics now are outstanding. I mean, we can see everything that's happening in a transaction, where it's coming from, what time. Those are business transactions, but it's all the way through. So yeah, I'm kind of geeking out there a little bit. Yeah, but yeah, absolutely, we can classify, we see what type of transaction, when they hit, and all that stuff. And just to further that, we get those questions all the time, especially during session. How many cement trucks were titled last year in the state of Minnesota? Boom, boom, boom. We have to go in and do that, and this is going to make that much easier.
And then also, you talked a lot about the culture change. There's a lot of DevOps presentations too. Do you have any kind of metrics to show that culture change about increased collaboration and people that wouldn't sit next to each other at a table and now they do?
Let me take that one. So from a metrics perspective, I would, like one of the things that I can measure is that people actually build stuff together. So like our DevOps team is jointly composed of people from apps and the app side of the house. And they are a single sprint team. They plan together, they commit together, they build work together. So I think that's, it's not exactly a metric, but seeing work seamlessly move without people really even, it's like, well, who's got time to pick up this work? Nobody even thinks about what their background is, or well, it's my work or your work. It's just our work. We got to get it all done. And they've all come into the same tooling, and so that also helps us kind of track our metrics. I will tell you we have kind of an agency operations team, and then we have a central operations team. Our agency operations team, and you can correct me if you have a different view, Paul, but I think that they have found it to be really valuable. They plan all their work this way, not just the MNLARS work, and they have become less reactive and more planful and happier. So I think all of that has been useful. I can't think of, go ahead.
Well,
Yep.
one metric which has to do with testing and UAT and patching, right? So you saw the waterfall, all the patching. One of the things that we always talk about, that Sue always says, is this business, they know what they're shipping, what we're shipping. They know what it is, right? And they've been in it, and they've tested it, and we've regression tested it. So number of patches, that's a solid metric. Because a lot of those patches were, that's not it. That's not what we talked about. That's not how we calculate that fee.
Yeah.
Now, no surprises there on that. That's a huge metric. So at any time, every other week, of course, we do the showcase. But every day, they're in there and they're looking at the system saying, yeah, that's it. That's what I'm talking about. That's a huge metric. Every time we did one of those patches, we had to turn a very manual UAT, and that was brutal. I could give you those numbers too, how long that took, right?
Any other questions? Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.